welcome to Ideagen TV. Today we are ecstatic to have live here from Washington, Dr. Chantal Line Carpentier. Chantal Line, welcome from UNCTAD.
Thank you. Such a pleasure to be here.
Chantal Line, it's an exciting moment. We're overlooking Washington, D.C. here, and we're here to talk about the UN and UNCTAD and all of the incredible leadership that's taking place there, especially important during these specific times in 2022. How would you say UNCTAD is contributing, and dare I say leading, toward including technical cooperation on achieving these global goals, those 17 global goals by 2030?
Well, George, this is a very important time in our history because developing countries are really been hurt really badly by the COVID-19 2 years, and now with the war in Ukraine. And UNCTAD has a mandate to support developing countries and its large population. The majority of the population in the world lives in developing countries. Some people tend to forget that. And so our mandate is to help those governments in developing countries to better leverage trade, investment, finance, technology, to basically take advantage of the economic system that we have, but also to enhance their productive capacity and institutional capacity to be able to transform their economy so that they can adapt to climate change while developing their infrastructure, sometimes getting their infrastructure for the first time. And so that's what we do. But right now, they don't have the fiscal space following these years of crisis, where the economy has been pretty much locked down.
Yeah, that's right. And I think before we get into the next question, I'd like to zero in on what we talked about a few minutes ago, which is leadership. The leadership in UNCTAD. You have an incredible leader.
Yes.
Leading up on UNCTAD. Tell us a little bit, sort of the behind the scenes. What's happening at UNCTAD today?
Well, we're very happy and lucky that we have Rebecca Greenspan, who is the former Prime Minister of Costa Rica. That is our new Secretary General as September last year. And so she joined us just before our 15th Quadrennial Conference, where we get our mandate for the next 4 years in Barbados. First time we had a ministerial conference for UNCTAD in a small island developing states, led by women. We had a woman leader, a woman head of the states, and we had Mia Mottley, President Mia Mottley in Barbados, who is a leader in herself.
Sure.
And so, as you can imagine, the outcome was fantastic. And so we have a great mandate to help developing country that is expanded in looking at, as they rebuild their economy, they can't ignore the other big crisis that is out there, which is climate change. And they can no longer just try to reduce mitigation. First of all, they don't create climate change as much as we do. I was giving you an example earlier, and you can't imagine. But one plasma TV in our living room is actually creating more greenhouse gas emission in a year than about 10 countries per capita. Each of these individuals produce less greenhouse gases in a year than our plasma TV. One element in our living room. And so we can expect them to be mitigating the climate change the same way we do. We need to help them, but they also need now to rebuild their economy, adapting to the climate change, because it's there, it's real, and we need to adapt to it because we need to build resilience not only to the pandemics, but also to climate change. And now we're heading into a triple crisis, as Secretary General Guterres says, which is the biodiversity crisis and the pollution crisis. And with COVID, we have a fourth one, which is inequality.
Well, that's a lot of issues coming at us, and in addition to that, the war.
Yeah, and you were talking about my new boss, the Undersecretary General Rebecca Greenspan. We had just during COVID-19, we were one of the first ones to produce a report on the economic impact for developing countries of COVID-19, and a lot of it is due to disruption in shipping, and 80% of trade is to shipping.
Sure.
Our demand went down, and so and shipping increased, the cost increase, and therefore it was harder for these economy first to get these goods. But imagine with the war now.
Yeah.
And so we had started this analysis, and with the war, what we did is we pushed further that analysis in terms of which country is vulnerable to the food, the fertilizer, the fuel, and the finance crisis. And so our Secretary General, Rebecca Greenspan, presented these results. And the Secretary General Guterres basically said, Rebecca, you're going to lead this food, fuel, finance crisis cell for the UN, because the UN is actually ahead of all institutions looking at which country are vulnerable, how they're vulnerable under each of these, the food, the fuel, and the finance. And then 69 countries on this planet, developing countries, are actually severely exposed to the three of them. And so we need, as the international community, to come together and have plans to support those countries. 107 of them are severely exposed to at least one of the three. And we saw in Sri Lanka, just one of them, finance, is enough to make the whole thing collapse. And so we at the international community, and sadly enough, the silver lining of the war is that the world has finally realized, well, with COVID, we kind of realized we're all interdependent, but we didn't act together.
Right.
With the war, we're like, oh, we need to act together.
Right.
We need to work together.
That's right.
And so this is what our Secretary General is actually leading right now for the Secretary General, and Amina Mohamed, our Deputy Secretary General.
Well, and what's incredible about that, what I find just incredible is that leadership component, the ability to try to get ahead of a crisis that we see is coming at us. When you said there's 69 countries vulnerable, they're vulnerable not only to the consequences of the food, fuel, and finance, but they're vulnerable to their enemies, whoever they are, and to other issues, including insurrection and you name it, and it can happen. And so congratulations in terms of helping the Secretary General, helping your boss think through how to mitigate the issues that are truly coming at us right now. Because you're right. I mean, you can't avert a crisis unless you understand what the elements are that are leading up to it.
Yep.
And so I stand in awe by what UNCTAD is doing. The recent report that was released, I think, just is striking on so many levels, but also it helps to frame it in a way that, again, can serve as a mitigation tool.
Yes.
To avoid much worse.
And it happens because we talk about leadership, but it's also our boss is an economist. She's the right person at the right place, and her heart is at the right place. So I'll pass her your congratulations to her for sure.
Well, thank you, Chantal Line. It's incredible. Let's shift a little bit. Let's shift to your work, your incredible work, your incredible career. What has been your favorite program or project that you've worked on throughout your career, and why was it your favorite?
Well, I would have said up to not long ago, it would have been when I supported the Rio +20 conference,
right.
And then the full negotiation during a year and a half of the Sustainable Development Goals.
Sure.
Because I remember, and some of my friends betting money with them, that the SDGs are here to stick. And they tell me, no, it's going to be another UN thing where it comes and goes. The SDGs are here and they're sticking. And the private sector, the investment sector, they're all on board. And we just, had a session. We're doing an ESG for board members, and it's clear that it's now in the board chambers across the country and across the world.
That's right.
And so they are here. And what's amazing to me is that, and even the co-facilitators I was supporting during the negotiation, they had not realized, it's only after, once we gaveled the 193 countries around the world agreed to these SDGs. What are the major problems on this planet? We all agreed, boom, gavel. Is that the co-facilitators realized, it's like, I never realized that crowdsourcing of information and ideas across such a diverse spectrum of people and countries and background would be so powerful. Even to them, and they're very, very astute, intelligent, and dedicated people. And even to me, it was amazing. So lots of hard work, but so rewarding, because now we know what the problem we need to solve are.
Right.
We just need to come together and
right.
put the solution forward.
Right. And I talk a lot about this. It's incredible to think about 193 member states coming together to agree on anything.
On anything. Many of them at war with one another.
And yet they agreed to these 17 global goals.
Yep.
How you get there is a different story.
Yep.
How you achieve the goal But laying out, these are the 17 most important issues we need to address today through 2030.
Yep.
Is the most amazing thing I think we've seen in our lifetime.
Yep. You know, Novozyme was one of the companies that first come forward and said, we're going to adopt the SDG for our strategy. You know what is amazing that they say is like the SDGs is the best future forecast for business that's ever been put in front of business.
Because the best future forecast for business.
Yeah, because basically each countries is basically, and local authorities are doing a consultation with their population and clustering them and deciding which one they're going to focus on. Incredible. So this is a great business model, business map of where investment is going to go.
So that's the roadmap for business. You consider the global goals the roadmap.
Yeah, they are.
Incredible. And so your career, what would you say has been the key to the success that you've achieved in your career?
I think it's getting people together. I think when people ask me what's the major constraint to achieving the SDG, I think it's ego. Each one of us has a big ego. We all want to think we're the one that can solve the problem. And no, these are complex problems that we've been having since the beginning of humanity. So if they were simple, we'd have solved them by now.
That's right.
But it's now we have the technology. The latest IPCC report, right, shows that we have the solution to most of the problem we have. We can halve greenhouse gas emission in the next decade. Right. We have the solution, but we need to come together. And so it's this ability, I think, to bring people of different background, different sector, different mindset together so we can think differently about solutions and not be limited by each of our little box, because otherwise we think in silo.
That's right.
And we have like an echo chamber of what we think. And we think we're right because everybody's telling us exactly the same things and we think we're right.
Right.
But you bring different people that think differently, like, whoa, didn't think about that one.
And you know what's exciting to hear is to hear you from the United Nations saying exactly that. That is what is so refreshing. I think people view any institution, any public institution, as maybe insular, as maybe not willing to change, whatever metaphor you'd like to come up with. Stiff, and not engaging. But yet here you are saying to people across the planet, no, we want to work with others. It's the key. Yeah. In fact, we have to work with others.
And actually, with the SDGs, at the Rio, it was the first time that member states admitted that they can't solve these problems alone, that we all need to work together to do it. Until then, it was like, the government can do it. Then it was the multilateral development bank can do it. Right. Then it was the private sector. Now the private sector think they can do it alone. They can do a lot, but they can't do it alone.
Right.
So it's together.
And are you seeing also the private sector, NGOs, et cetera, also thinking that way like the UN is?
Yeah, definitely. I think because they were engaged in the process, so they have ownership of the process. They own them. The Millennium Development Goal were developed by a few experts over a weekend. And these everybody feels like they have their little part in them.
And they did, right?
They did. My estimate is 33% of the targets and goals were developed by local authorities, women's group, youth group, business sector, and the business sector is moving from. CSR, ESG was like risk management. Right. With the SDGs, they're switching to, that's business opportunity. Right. And Paul Pullman did a great job with his commission showing this $12 trillion business opportunities of achieving the SDGs. Incredible. And so those companies that will be able to look at them, not as risk management, but as business opportunity, are the ones that will be the winners in the future.
And so that's just amazing and inspiring, quite frankly, to hear from you at UNCTAD, and you're leading the way at UNCTAD. You're leading the way. There's no doubt about it. What people need to know is that Dr. Chantal Line Carpentier is leading the way with Rebecca Greenspan at UNCTAD to change the world.
I support her.
You support her. You support her. That's exactly right. And shifting a bit, let's look at, so we heard the positive. We heard that bringing folks together, private sector, public sector, NGOs, everyone's in agreement. That's very important, and they're espousing that. What are the inhibitors to achieving the global goals by 2030?
And it's related to the previous question, right? Once you bring all these people from different background and different thinking and mentality, we all speak different language. Mm-hmm. So it's then the next step is, how do we all speak the same language? So when you say opportunity, it means the same as me, or risk.
Right.
Maybe it means different things. So so you need to have that ability, first of all, to create a safe space for people to speak.
Right.
Because we see a lot of polarization right now, right? So we need a safe space for people to say what they think. The second is that we have clear language, and that's what the SDG do too, is that we have a clear language. We now have a narrative.
Yes.
At least we can agree on these things.
Right.
And then
you build around it.
And then it's to get the language on the means of implementation, the mean of getting there, to do it, to implement it. And that's where I think the challenge still remains. When the investors talk about something, they use a completely different language than the NGOs. But oftentimes they mean the same thing, but they don't know it. So they keep talking past each other. And so our role is to make them realize, well, yeah, you realize you actually agree on these two things. Because
you're saying it in a different way.
Right. And then the one piece where I see you don't agree is here. So maybe we should focus on that and try to see how we can advance that. And so that's in my, and so that's one. The second one, the constraint is lack of regulation.
Yeah.
So in Europe, for instance, they have a lot of regulation on disclosure, on standard, on green financing, sustainable financing. In the U.S. now, we just had the SEC. They gave their statement 2 weeks ago. It's going to change because now the business is going to start paying attention much more. And so regulation is second. And then third is investment.
Yeah.
And so now, with the COVID-19 and the war, we actually, all the gain we had made since 2015, investing in the SDGs, so aligning the capital, the hundreds of trillions of dollars in the capital market. We had started to get a sliver of that to align with the SDGs in developing countries. And it was still a small sliver, but we're getting there. All of this has been wiped out with the COVID-19 and now with the war. So now we need to work even harder, as we have 8 years left, to get that capital aligned with the SDGs, and especially SDGs in developing countries where the demand is the highest.
Do you see, this is sort of not my next question, but I need to follow up here. We wiped out some of the gains through COVID with the alignment in terms of investment. Was there anywhere where we actually accelerated?
Well, digitalization, right? Okay. I mean, there's two things that accelerated with COVID. Sustainability, because of the obvious inequality that was exposed. And second is sustainability, because we saw our lack of resilience.
That's right.
And the fact that we're all interconnected and everything is interconnected. One health issue literally collapsed our economy, the entire economy. So our resilience is that. So at least it made us realize that. And so now we just need to act on it.
Right. So there are some positives, that maybe some unexpected positive consequences of COVID, which were the digitization of this
digitalization, e-education, e-health, e-financing, e-customs, so removing all these barriers to customs so that the flow of trade and services go faster, and it reduce corruption and increase government revenue.
Sure.
So these are all accelerated, but then it also shows the large digital divide that we have, and those that are not connected, we're left even further behind. And so we need now connectivity is becoming a basic right, a basic need, just like access to water and energy.
Incredible.
Yeah.
So access to information is becoming a basic need, is what you're saying.
Because data is the new dollar. The data is the new gold.
Crypto.
Right? Well, crypto, we'll see. The crypto currency is one thing, right? But then there's the whole blockchain technology, which has been helping into maintaining contract. How do you call that? Securing that it's the real contract and whatever. So there's a lot of blockchain technology that can be used to help trust and secure your supply chain. The provenance of your goods, and ensuring it claimed to have no slave worker, that you can actually trace that. With blockchain, for instances. The cryptocurrency jury's still out, right? Okay. It's still woo. So I wouldn't, I wouldn't put my whole pension in that. Let's put it this way.
Okay. Well, we'll stay tuned on that one. What?
But I'm not an expert, so.
Right. Understood. So as we're leading down this path, so you and I had a conversation in January of 2020. You'll recall. We had a conversation about the global goals.
Yes.
And right before, no one knew. no one knew that just a few short months later, to your point, the entire world would experience for the first time in human history the same exact thing.
Yep.
Shutdown, lack of access to travel, fear, a lot of fear.
A lot of fear. No vaccine.
No vaccine.
No more travel.
No travel.
I mean, we closed the air. We closed some train lines. We
All of
closed.
that.
It was yeah.
And here we are a few years later in emerging to some degree from this.
Well, we are emerging, but developing countries are not. We have a two-speed recovery. So in the US and Canada, the growth in GDP is higher than it would have been without the COVID-19 because of the trillions of dollars have been invested in the economy by the government. Developing countries don't have that fiscal space to do that. They didn't invest the trillions we put. Canada is the same. But their economy, before the war in Ukraine, we were predicting that it would take until the end of 2023 before they go back to where they were before the pandemic. So it's really a two-speed recovery that we're seeing.
And that's another element to this, is to shine a bright light on where resources need to be placed in order to ensure that from a macroeconomic and even from a microeconomic standpoint, which UNCTAD is so good at, obviously, and leading on, that we can avert the shocks to these economies, which then create strife, war,
civil unrest,
and all the other things that we're talking about here. And so,
and by the way, George, there's no way to do business in a failed state or in unstable society.
Right. So another thing I love about what you're talking about here, in addition to everything really, is your espousal of business's role. And really what you're saying is business success. So a business now has a roadmap with these global goals.
Yes.
Love that. And a business also has an opportunity to help avert some of the crises in working together from a cross-sector standpoint with governments and NGOs, et cetera. And the roadmaps are there. If you look at the recent UNCTAD report released April 13th.
Secretary General report.
The Secretary General
that
report.
My Secretary General supported.
That your Secretary General supported. That report, I encourage everyone to read through closely. It's startling. It's startling. It's eye-opening. It's also an opportunity.
Definitely.
And if we don't take that opportunity to get ahead of it, we have an opportunity to get ahead of what can happen.
Yes, we know. COVID-19, we didn't know. Well, some of our government knew they knew some pandemic would come, but now we know there's this tremendous risk, and it's upon us to act before all of these. It's 1.7 billion people that are at risk of basically losing a decade of development and maybe going back, most likely.
1.7 billion people.
We're not talking small change here.
We're not.
And these are the most vulnerable already.
And they're the most vulnerable already. It's, not often at a loss for words, but I am at this moment when you put it into that kind of context. Chantal Line, what is your call to action for our global audience? What would you say is, if you had one thing to say, I'd like for you to be able to do this to help move the needle, what would that be?
Well, I think there's one driver in our economy, it's finance. And so look at how you invest your money. Look at where your investment analyst, right? Where's that money? And make sure that it's aligned with your values. And if you do believe in the SDGs, ensure that that money is aligned with the SDGs and not greenwashing and not in whatever other sectors that might be actually making things worse. If you have a pension from university, from the government, make sure your pension is invested in a way, because until we align these finance and these trillions of dollars with the SDGs, it will be extremely difficult for a business that, even if the C-suite wants to do the right thing, if the board won't let them because they are looking at the next quarter returns instead of looking in the long term, they won't be able to do it. And that change happened to the financial sector. And that we reinvest. It's our money. These trillions of dollars, it's ours, that we gave to these investment bankers, that we gave to these banks, that we gave to these asset managers to invest for us. So we have a voice in how that money is allocated.
That's right. Good point. Good point. I'd like to turn to you, turn to you specifically and ask, when you're faced with a new challenge, We've talked about a lot of challenges here today, and we're overlooking again Washington, the White House, the Capitol, the Jefferson Memorial, the Lincoln Memorial, the Washington Monument,
Great
U.S.
leaders.
Capitol. We've thought about this country, which is young relatively on the global scene.
Yep.
And we think about the challenges that those that help found the country and continue to run the country face each and every day. And we zero in on something called a decision-making process. Everybody has one, whether they realize it or they don't. There's a process that you go through. What is your decision-making process? And I'd like to go just a step further. Who do you turn to when you try to make that decision?
Yeah, I have a good friend called Tess Mateo, and she has been kind of, you know her.
I do.
And she's a powerhouse. And so at some point I was asking her about, what do I do with my career? What do I do? And she said, create yourself in your mind a advisory board, or, that you turn to, and then you run the ideas in your head with that board and paper. And and you can imagine the question they would ask you, and then because sometimes we lie even to ourselves about some of these things, and so you basically fake that conversation with your board, and then I have the real ones. Some of them are real, so I can just pick up the phone and call them.
Okay.
But it unfortunately came later in my career. I realized that I learned by talking, so I need a sounding board. I need to talk to people. So we have the moonshotters. There's women that we decided that we have a moonshot, and the moonshot is, and you love this, George. It's combining a lot of people focus on the E in ESG environment, but you need to focus on the S as well. And with the COVID, we saw that the S became more important. So you need to stack those two. So how do you stack the two, right? Well, you say, okay, we need to invest massive investment in renewable energy. So that's going to address the environmental issue and climate. But if you also say, well, 30% of the asset owners need to be women. Now you just address your S as well, right? How, who's going to own that asset? And same with space, same with all the growth sector. If we ensure that 30%, so the moonshot for us is that of these $12 trillion business opportunities with the SDGs, 30% should go to women. And so how do we ensure that women, so my process is always, who is going to be left behind with that decision, with that? Is it going to be rural women? Is it going to be indigenous people? Is it going to be, because we were not taught that at school. And then I have a very stupid way of making decision when I can't make a decision. And you're going to laugh, and kids don't do that at home. It basically, if I can't decide and I think I don't know what I want, I throw a coin. And then I wish, whichever, as soon as you throw the coin, you're going to start wishing if it's head or tail. And then you know what you want. So that's my stupid way of making a decision.
Well, there's no silly or wrong way to make a decision. And sometimes making the decision is part of it. Yay or nay.
Yeah.
So,
and for me, there's nothing worse. The worst thing than taking the wrong decision is not take a decision at all. I think that's the worst decision. So I'll gather as much information as possible, and I'll go with my gut. I do listen to my gut now, and go for it. And then just face up if I was wrong.
That's right. And some people say that maybe having too much information is also not the right way to make a decision. You should have enough information, but maybe not every bit of information. And at that point, make the decision. Yeah. So that's your decision-making process, which is exactly why I believe you're so successful.
I don't know, but I see a lot of people, it's paralysis by analysis. It's like, analyze until, the cows come home. It's like, no, you're going to decide at some point.
That's right. Exactly. So let's go even further. Authenticity. At Ideagen, we like to say people come in and it's authentic. Why? Because it's not scripted. It's not, your answers today are all things that you know, right? So how do you define authentic global leadership?
I think it's it's admitting your mistake. It's showing your mistake. It's being able to expose your mistake, to be able to be vulnerable. And that's just being humane, right? So for me, it's just realize we're all human, and we all have weaknesses. We all going to make mistakes, be able to forgive other people, but forgive ourselves as well. I think it's, it looks complicated, but it's pretty simple in the end. And I think people sense it. If you are being if I treat everybody. If I talk to a minister, a prime minister, or I talk to a peasant, I'll be the same. I may change the language so people understand me,
Sure.
but it won't change who I am and the way I interact with these people.
That's incredible. And so, meaning and purpose. How, Chantaline, do you find meaning and purpose? I've heard, and I think our global audience will have heard at this point in this interview, how you found meaning and purpose. But can you articulate simply, how do you find meaning and purpose in your work at UNCTAD, at the UN?
I must say I'm privileged because, I work for the UN. So by definition, our work is to help people. And we work for the poorest countries, the developing countries, and with a focus on the poorest of the poorest. And so for us, it's by definition. So I feel privileged because I get up in the morning and I think, maybe I'll be able to help somebody today in the world. Like maybe our analysis, our work, our technical cooperation will help government having better science, technology, innovation policies, having better entrepreneurship policies so they can help the entrepreneurs. It's all having an impact on real people. And for me, I think my personal, because you can't do everything. So I try to focus on economic empowerment of women, empowerment of micro, small enterprises and entrepreneurs, because I do believe they're the one that are the key to achieving the SDGs, and finance and aligning the capital with the SDGs. And I think, there's this funny thing people say: if you do what you love, you never work a day of your life. People call me a workaholic. I'm like, no. Not really working. I'm having fun. Not always fun, right? Especially in these days. But I feel like I would do it if I was not paid. And I'm like, oh, I'm paid for doing what I want to do.
And that's your meaning and purpose. Dr. Chantal Line Carpentier, UNCTAD, changing the world. You, my friend, are an authentic leader, the definition thereof. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, George. Thank you.